very nice to meet everybody, the people I haven't talked to, which is actually quite few people in this room. It's really been an amazing opportunity for me to get to know some people. And then some people, my friends in the back that was on posting on Reddit, and I was, putting my own opinion and kind of, Reddit's kind of edgy at times, and getting some feedback. And the first thing this guy pointed out was that I'd messed something up and there was a bug, and I was like, great. But I go back and look, and he's right. And we kind of hopscotched that thing for a while, and like I kept getting, he'd post something, I'd post something. I'm like, man, this dude does not miss. Like, he hits it every single time. He's a very good developer. And so that's Michael Kupitz in the backs, and get here and get to meet him, That's really cool. Like the way paths cross on the internet, because I think it can be like impersonal at times. And I think it's incredibly important to make sure that we have personal relationships, especially as like developers. It's very easy for me to get isolated and forget about that, So I'm Alex Seidler. This is one of those situations. I should probably get this. All right. I work at RGC Data. That's the company I work for. I think it's important in the interest of transparency. I am not the best FileMaker developer. I know enough to get around, and I can absolutely look at a solution and navigate that. But I don't want to stand up here and try to falsely qualify as an expert FileMaker developer. All of you are expert FileMaker developers. You guys don't need another expert FileMaker developer. So I was brought on to work at RGC Data, not only to dive into FileMaker and learn about it, and after a pretty long career doing various types from software to a lot of web programming and things like that, I hadn't really heard the word FileMaker too much. I'm sure it has come up, but it's just one of the technologies I hadn't heard, and in my field there was MySQL. Kind of get sick of that, and so I've learned it's an incredible platform, and something I wanted to hit. It was brought up. I'm probably going to reference the Proof Kit session a lot, and if you're on Zoom, I think it was recorded. Look it up, and it's really cool. But trust and security are going to be very important. They are very important. Obviously, my phone has a lot of personal information. It has, access to my bank account. I don't really want to put everything out there for you guys, but it's got all kinds of stuff on there, and we're in an ever increasing, I wouldn't say scary world, but there people have the power of a cluster of supercomputers, in essence, at home, and not everybody needs the power of a supercomputer, so not to get too far off track, but like having a platform that has a proven history of security and trust. If I could think back how many times there's been an issue with SQL, they had to patch like a vulnerability. There was a long time where SQL injections were a really big thing, and they could escape out and inject their code in that. And there's like some scary stuff, and they get in there, get in your database on the web and mess stuff up. So trust and security is such a huge thing, and I think it will continue to be a huge thing as AI evolves. I just think that you couldn't get a better selling point if it ended right there alone. We want our customers' data to be safe. We want our own data to be safe. We want everything to be safe. So it's pretty cool. My session is called Platform Agnostic, Real Mobile Apps with FileMaker at RGC Data. If you've used the app, if you don't mind, you're not going to hurt my feelings. How many people have used the app since you've been here? We got a few. Is Angelo in here? How many people on Android have used the app? My guy back there. So all of that, I told him at breakfast, I said, all of that work, man, that was for you. Because that was one of the first questions that I had. I like to do this, and then we're going to split this up, hopefully, into 3 different sections. We're going to do the why, the how, and then when it got real, the problems, the things that came up that maybe I didn't do right, or things like that, and what I learned from it, so I can hopefully give some experience and some guidance, at least from my own limited personal experience, into things to consider if you're wanting to connect a native mobile app and you want to power it with FileMaker. There is a degree of architecture that I believe should go into that. It doesn't mean that I don't need to plan everything out, but there's some things I need to think about, and I'll get into that. But FileMaker has powered real business for decades, and it still does. The challenge was not the data. I think everybody here, even me, could have built a rudimentary database, that can handle most of this stuff. I think we could all do that, right? Or the logic. There's nothing too incredibly complicated. There's a couple tricks and things that I tried on there. I will hammer on the GPS map at the end, but that was one that was an uphill battle to try to figure some stuff out. But it's not the logic. When this project was brought to me, this was something that I wasn't, like hired to do this. Okay. At the very beginning, this was like a passion project. Proofkit talked about AI psychosis, I believe, was the thing. And this was one of these weekend things. And I got this bright idea probably on a Saturday night at like 11 p.m. as I'm like brewing up a pot of coffee, that I'm like, I want to build an app. I want to build an app that works fine on Android, or it works fine on iOS, or it works fine on Windows, Google Pixel. I guess that's Android, like different platforms. But like, why don't those run on FileMaker? And that's not to say they don't. Well, from my research, people are doing this. It's not that hard. It's really not. But there was not much documentation out there. I believe I found one blog article. I believe it was Codance Full City. I think we have some employees here from them. I believe they covered some of this stuff, but there really was no reference guide out there that I could find. So the challenge wasn't that stuff. It was just simply reaching people in more places. I remember talking to Ron, who's my boss and my best friend. And this is back a while, and I'll try to remember to hold this up. I can hear the difference, but this is back a while, and I kind of was asking, like, okay, I was teaching me about like FileMaker Go and different systems and things like that. And I was asking questions, I'm like, well, that's awesome. I was like, so you work on a Mac, it seems like, with FileMaker. He's like, no, you can work on Windows. I'm like, well, that alone is really cool. And I was like, okay, so if you wanted to make something for a phone, because nowadays, how many projects for like a company, could they not use something on a mobile? Like if I'm looking for something, when I got here, I'm not from California, if you can't tell by my accent, so we landed in San Jose and I had a couple hours to explore, and I wanted to explore. First thing I did was whip out my phone and go to map and be like, what's around me, and found a Whole Foods. I'm like, cool, there's a Whole Foods right there. That's cool. I'll walk the 1.5 miles to Whole Foods. That's my vacational trip. And I did, and along the way, I clicked them, and I realized if I really wanted to get some coupons for that Whole Foods, because if you've been in a Whole Foods, it's not a bad idea to have coupons. But I would probably get their app, and it's just kind of like something that I think that is expected in certain contexts. Not always the right solution. Like our company does not need an app, I don't think. We could make one, but does it really bring value? But certain situations. So it was more about extension, reaching other platforms, and that kind of was where the conversation got. I finally brought up, what about Android? And then I think Ron paused a little bit, and I've come to learn that like there's ways around that. And that's not like a no, but that was one of the questions. So like my background is in, as I said, from software development. This is starting in 7th grade. I think I built we had video game systems and we had cheat codes back then, but like this is going to show my age, but there really wasn't the internet that we have today. So they'd have these magazines that you signed up, and they'd come once a month, and hopefully the video game would be in there and I could get the cheat codes to play with my buddies, and like half the time they weren't in there. And so I built a HTML website way back, GeoCities, I believe I hosted on, if anybody, I see some smiles. Yeah, I'm that old. And I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the idea that I can create something in a computer, and not only that, like other people can use it. So that morphed. I got into Basic. I really got into Visual Basic for a long time, making Windows software, and I've jumped through more languages that I'm not fluent in now, but I've jumped through more languages, and I could get up here and repeat. And so simply reaching people in more places. And I think once I find my stride, we'll kind of chill out and get where we need to go. But this project shows how a modern app and a website, both of them, can sit on top of a familiar FileMaker system and give users the kind of experience they expect today without replacing the system they rely upon. It's a lovely AI written sentence, but it said it better than the one I fed into it that I came up with. But that's true. How often is that the use case? If I have like a greenfield, if I have a project where I can build from the ground up and I have a vision and I can do whatever I want, you know what I mean? The sky's the limit, really. And I think we saw that a couple of days ago, and it can happen fast and it can happen well. But more often than not, at least the clients that we've gotten RGC data, they have a FileMaker system. More than likely, they probably have a website, and sometimes that answer is like, well, let's, we can redo all of this. And like, oh no, we've had the same database for 30 years. Works great. Don't touch it. And it's kind of like, oh my God. The fact that you had it for 30 years probably says you should update some stuff. But, so like, this is this was already here. I don't know who all, Jonn, I know probably Ron more than anybody last year built the database that we expounded on this year for full access. So that was already there. The website was already there. We added a bunch of bells and whistles. We redid the engine. And so it was just about extension. So part one, the why. And I think I answered that really when I hit that question about Android. That became my AI psychosis. And I was like, that weekend, I'm all hyped up and I'm caffeinated. I'm like, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to figure it out. I'm sure people have done it. So like, now I need to know how to do it, So FileMaker is powering the conference. And there was an amazing app that was made last year, FileMaker Go, that Dennis Burnham made. It covered everything that you need to cover. So this is purely like a, how do I do it? And can I do it? And can I learn along the way sort of thing, if that makes sense to you guys, right? So that was the why of it. And another thing, we're sitting in a meeting. So I'm a volunteer. I'm about as low down in the volunteer level as you can get, but I am technically on the volunteer committee. And I wasn't able to make it here last year. And I heard all these big things and everybody's talking about it. And one of the things that was brought up, what I heard and what were said were two different things. One of the things that was said more or less was, I think during some of the sessions, there might have been like a little Wi-Fi issue, right? So I was probably like on my computer coding when this is going on. I think Taylor might have been in that meeting, but like, yeah. And what I heard was the Wi-Fi is no good, like there is no Wi-Fi. Like I'm lucky if I get 1 bar of Wi-Fi when I'm out there. And so that kind of takes the website out of the mix, right? Like what good is building this fancy website if there's no Wi-Fi? And luckily there is, thank God, but and there's good Wi-Fi. But that's what I heard, and that was another part of the why, because I wanted to get into, like, if I take web out of the mix, if I go native mobile on here, I have more options. I can do offline caching, I can do things like that, which is most definitely what I did. You can tell that I have a lot of AI graphics on here. I am not good at PowerPoint, so I had a lot of help with the graphical part of it. But I think that's our projection for next year: 1,248 attendees, 312 sessions, and 876 tickets, which means like 400 scholarships. That's not really. There's a lot of freebies there. But FileMaker's doing important work here. It's already doing all this kind of stuff. So it wasn't like, how do we get away from FileMaker? How do we build a new system? How do we do something else? It's like, how do we take what's already working, what people are comfortable with, and that we know how to do, and how do we ideally reach more people with that? Or how do we expand or extend it? How can it be more flexible and more available? And so that was the thinking behind it. And then, of course, if we can do this, because I didn't know at that time, I didn't really know how FileMaker would play with a native app, but like, if we can do this, how would that look? And this has been built kind of by committee. I think it's fair to say I've done the lion's share of the coding work on this, but Glenn Cates has also done work on this. There has been input from the entire team. I have gotten amazing feedback since I've been here. Everybody that's come up and been like, hey, I love the app. Like, it's fine. I really like it. But could you maybe add this? Like, thank you. You're right. Like, that's stuff I didn't think about, So I don't know. It's kind of like a group thing, man. So this is the why. Let me get a couple of these. I think I know how many animations, but next year I'm going to learn how to make all the animations autonomous. I saw that in some other presentations and was highly impressed. But so we have one FileMaker system. There's many ways to experience, right? Everything is running on the FileMaker backend. This is a hybrid approach in some ways because our website is built on WordPress. If you've ever worked with WordPress, it's pretty much like it's enmeshed with MySQL. Like, you're not going to get away from that for some of the workings of that, right? But in terms of the actual like data, the attendees, the sessions, the profiles, even the container data, your profile picture, your location, all that kind of stuff. All of that is FileMaker, right? I didn't clone all this and just build it on the web and connect it to mobile apps. So when somebody whips out the app and they're actually using this thing, you're pulling data from FileMaker. You're just not pulling it directly from FileMaker. And I think that's an important thing to cover. And if I don't cover anything else or don't say anything else of value, if anybody's looking to do native, like mobile apps, this is something I would suggest is have a middle layer. Especially if you're working with like React or JavaScript or any derivative of JSX and TypeScript, any of this kind of stuff. And the main reason I say that, and I'll get into it more later, but the main reason I say that is because connecting like a React type app, and this is with almost any mobile app, right? Connecting it all the way over here, which seems like it would be simpler, is a major security vulnerability. People that know what they're doing. Do we have anybody here that uses dev tools, inspector, things like yeah, Josh, there we go. Good stuff, man. Me too. Yeah, I thought you were raising your hand. But anyways, I can very easily, there's tools out there, and I can very easily, just with my internet browser, take a look at every network request. I can pull apart every single JSON thing that's getting passed. I can look at the login, the password, the email, the token, the whatever is getting passed, right? So if you're requiring some kind of master thing, and I'm not good enough in FileMaker to make all these different permissions and stuff, it's good to have a secure middle layer. So the app reaches out to the web, right? It's not a push, it's a pull from the web. And they communicate with each other. The app reaches the web and authenticates, and the web, this is a different login and password. The web reaches over to FileMaker. We keep all the credentials to the database on the server behind the scenes. They're never displayed and they're never shown, right? So in my mind, in my experience, what I've taught or been taught and what I've learned is that is the best practice to do things. Have some kind of middleware layer there, if you want to keep your data secure. And it also helps with caching, and a lot of that gets into the how of it, which is the second part of it. But the mobile talks to a single REST endpoint. There's actually a few of them, but we refactored it and some stuff. So basically, there's a traffic controller. The app reaches out and has a REST route. Worked with REST, but it has like you'd land an airplane down a runway, right? And then right there's a traffic controller that says, well, what do you need? I guess, where are you coming from? Like Dallas this way, or Fort Worth this way, or Sacramento this way. And that's like attendees this way, session this way, profile this way. And we were able to really keep things fairly organized doing that. And I will hit caching pretty hard, although if you went to Ron's session, he hit it really hard because it's important. But we tried to limit the calls on the database as much as possible. And to me, that also feels like best practice no matter what language you're working with. If you can avoid hammering a database, 100 times, if you can do it 2 times and get the same result, back off that server, let it breathe, And this gave us an ability to do that. So once it gets to the web, kind of skipping ahead here, but that's where it checks the caching data. That's where it securely connects to FileMaker. That's where it says, okay, the bouncer lets it in, like, here's your attendees, you're good, right? And it hands it back to the web, which sanitizes it and hands it back to the app. So there's 3 layers going on, but all the data is saved at the FileMaker backend. And I get into the hybrid side of it because there's a couple things that are stored locally and there's local caching. When we talked about when I misheard the fact that there was no Wi-Fi here, right? Which we all know is not true. But something I had to figure out was like, well, what if the Wi-Fi does cut out? Does that, and let's say that everybody in here wants to favorite a session or do something, but the Wi-Fi's out. Like, does that just bomb it? Are you just lost? So there's a hybrid solution in there where this gets cached locally, and I'll get into that. But yeah, every layer focuses on what it does best, and they work together without friction, right? We let the web and FileMaker talk, that works great. We let the web and the mobile app talk, and that works great. And we avoid the security risk of the mobile app reaching out to FileMaker. And I will say, and I want to make sure it's clear, there probably is a way to do that very securely. I know I have heavy hitters from Claris in the audience. I'm not speaking for Claris that you can't do that. I'm sure there is a way to do it. But in the deadline, and I'm working on a passion project, I just didn't have the time to look into it, didn't have the time. But that's the way I've been taught to set up mobile. So that's something to consider with mobile, is like what's going to be in the middle, and more importantly, what's going to talk with what, how does that look? And I wish I'd planned this out a little better in the app, but we kind of figured a lot of stuff on the way. I built apps before. I wasn't new to mobile development, but this was sort of a different sort of thing, and I was very new to connecting mobile in any shape or form to FileMaker, and there was not a lot of reference materials out there. I don't know how uncommon this is, but I don't think it's right now at this time. I don't think it's very common. But I was going to tell an anecdote. I think I'm past the past the nervousness stage. But there was an anecdote I was thinking this morning actually, and I was thinking about, so these presentations Friday, every presentation has been amazing in its own way, and I'm realizing I'm very humbled with the people that I've met here. Everybody is so intelligent, creative. It's really amazing to me. But I was sort of sitting there after the proof kit one on Friday, and kind of thinking to myself, and I'm thinking like, well, what exactly am I giving a presentation on at this point? Like, am I going to teach you how to make a React app? And it's like, why? Why do you need to know that? And that's the honest truth. Can AI throw this stuff together in vibe code? Absolutely it can. And it can very well. Very well, So I'm sitting there and I'm like, my ego's kind of crushed. Not that it was really big to begin with, but I'm like, what am I going to get? Am I have to get up there and dance in front? Like, what am I going to have to do to keep attention? So anyways, I was thinking, I remember these big, Steve Jobs, these huge Apple conventions, and there's like thousands of, and there's probably people in the room that went to some of these, and they had, they had thousands of people there and probably tens of thousands of people watching, and they're these big dramatic like announcements. And so I asked Gemini this morning, I like to chat with Gemini when it's just chat, and I asked Gemini this morning, I said, did they ever schedule somebody like after Steve Jobs? Like, was that a presentation slot that like, they do their big reveal, and then there's like a dude an hour later, because that's kind of how I'm feeling right now, getting up here and it's like, am I even a developer anymore? Is any of this even necessary? And the funny story is like, yes, they did a few times. Yes, they did. So I think it was 2002, Mac OS 9, maybe something like that. And they did this big thing, and they have all these people that are developing for Mac OS 9 in the audience, right? And it's like a lot of people. It's a big deal. And Apple comes out with a dramatic funeral for OS 9. Like, that's it. It's dead. They're killed it. They did a whole funeral and everything, right? And I was just thinking, like, God, what did those people that had to go next, that had to get up there and be like, so this is how you do this in OS 9. You're like, how does that feel? And the fact that you guys laugh like you are my people 100%, because I thought that was funny, So the point is, are people still developing? Are people still developing for iOS and OS and stuff like that? Yes, absolutely. Did that kill out every developer job? No. Did there have to be a lateral step maybe, or a pivot to pick up something new or approach it from a different angle? Yes, and that's probably the world that we live in for a little bit, but hopefully I can cover some of the 30 minutes in. I started a little late, but hopefully we can cover some of the architecture of this stuff, because I think that is something, that's more important with how you build this. Let's see. Yeah. How do these work together? The how. That was a perfect segue right there. But okay. How does a phone talk to FileMaker without making a complete mess of things? And I decided on only 2 slides for this. As you can tell, and a lot of animations. Yeah, I got carried away when I got in PowerPoint. I was like, cool, animate, fade in, fly in. So basically, how does it do it, right? And I think I've covered some of this, but you run the app on the attendee's phone, right? And this is a cross-platform app. I'm so glad somebody had Android. Otherwise, you guys would just have to take my word for it, But it's in Google Play Store. It's in the Apple Store. And in my mind, if you can get in the store, you probably built a product that's all right. Because we got denied from both stores one time because I messed up some permission stuff. But yeah, I mean, it happened. But only one time. And I'll have to say, out of the 2, let's suck up a little bit. Out of the 2, Apple was the far better experience. They actually gave me some guidance, and they were kind of nice about it, and it was no big deal. And Google was like, hey, figure it out, bro. Like, that was pretty much like, we don't want you, and like, good luck, good luck. So, but yeah, so it's a cross-platform thing. And so in this example, we're just trying to favorite a session, right? So I'm going in here and I want to favorite Taylor's session because I want to remember it and I want to go to it. And there's that little heart on that. I could probably get up here and teach you guys some tricks about these parts of the app that I bet nobody touched.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you just for a moment because I didn't even realize that was the example you were going to be using.
Oh yeah.
But I would remind you, and maybe we can kind of
qualify
absolutely. The fact that the favorites actually don't work in the app. That's the one thing that we had a bug that we couldn't fix. So if you try to save or change your favorites in the app, they don't save to FileMaker. So when you close and reopen, they're gone. but you still can do them in the website, and then they show up in the app, and you can use them for notifications and everything. But I just wanted to let everybody know that. So if you're sitting in the audience trying to test this, we did. That was one thing that we read. That was like,
I'm gonna repeat some of that, but I'm not gonna. We're just gonna act like that's not a thing for the people that's recording. But yeah, I did find the one thing on my presentation that I thought, hey, it's always the simplest thing, right? And when you're doing mobile, especially when you're going through the store, it's not as easy as just hitting save. Like I gotta save, I gotta compile it on. Tip right here, I should have said, if you want to work with making an app for iPhone or iOS, buy a Mac, rent a Mac, do something, because you need a Mac to do that. But you can do Android development on either one. To use Xcode, which is the coding environment that Apple uses, that has to be done on a Mac of some shape or form. I can't pull it on my Windows computer and compile it. So like, just a heads up, if you want to do that, like, don't find that out down the road when you're done with the app, but you don't have $1,200 for, a good map or something like that. But we'll still use the favorite session. Just don't take it literally. That's the one bug that I've found so far. And it happened right when we got here. And we're like, it's the morning before we came to lunch and set up. And we're frantically hoping it's on the web end, because we can patch that. That's no big deal. But, demo gods, man. So the React app asks to do something. Let's say we're going to review a session, right? We're going to review a session. We're going to give it 5 stars, right? The app reaches out to the API layer. So this is all done through the API. I am not an expert on OData, but I believe you could use that just as easily. We use the data API, and that worked amazingly. Because whenever you have like an API pipeline, and there's an opening and you can input, output with that, you can pretty much talk to anything nowadays. It just is a matter of like, what is the API? What language does it speak, and what does it support? What does it support? It's going to allow that communication, and that's the tricky part. And that's a lot of what we do at RGC Data is integrations, and figure out, you have QuickBooks for Windows, can we connect that to FileMaker? You have a website, we connect that. You have a Shopify, are they going to let me connect that to FileMaker? So a lot of integrations. You have A, let's connect it to B. So it reaches out to the web end. I probably should have told you I talk fast also. I'm extremely ADD, so I'll try to slow some of this down. So the React reaches out to the API layer of the website that was already existing. Did I have to use WordPress, or did we have to? No, absolutely not. It could have very easily just been a standard. Could have been React, could have been just a PHP, just a regular, as long as it had access to make that API endpoints on there. But we had the WordPress, and one of the benefits here, and I think it's important to consider for things like this, is also like who's going to be using this. If there's a committee, you might have people that are amazing FileMaker developers, but they're not web developers, their skill set just isn't in that area, but they're on this committee and they want to make changes, so that's one of the benefits. That's pretty much, I think, the reason that we chose WordPress for that. It can be really user friendly, but it gets the request, it checks it, so we authenticate it for sure. It translates it, because I had to normalize the data just to make sure everything was lined up. Now, if I had done this from scratch, that normalization wouldn't have been that big of a deal, because all the field names would have been lined up across the 3, but we had an existing system. It doesn't always work. So it was very close, but it came. So we're speaking in JSON through all of this, just the same way. We normalize it, we sanitize it, we authenticate, and the website, as I said, that has the secure keys to connect to the database. That is server side. That's not getting shown to network tools. That's not getting shown to the consumer here. So the phone never sees those keys. So your phone never touches the actual master credentials to get into the full access database, ever. But we get flagged through here, and our traffic controller routes it, right? And we go to FileMaker system of record. This is basically through the data API, connects through FileMaker. It parses the request. We find out, well, what are we looking for here? So if we're doing reviews, we're looking for reviews. If we're doing favorites, we're looking for the related records for favorites. And it hands back what it needs to hand back and nothing else. And that's fairly simple to do on the FileMaker side. I think it's a great platform for saying, here's the layout, here's the fields or whatever. This is what we want to return. It's so fast. It's got that really sweet like graphical user interface, or the up and coming web user interface, like all that stuff. It's very fast to be able to piece that stuff together. versus working in like a PHP MyAdmin, like a MySQL, table is kind of like ugly and not as user friendly, and there's a learning curve. And that's it. And it goes back to the web, right? And the web knows it has a trusted connection from FileMaker. And of course, that JavaScript call, that fetch call is waiting right here. And it returns information back to the app. And so the phone never speaks to FileMaker directly. The API layer handles the entire conversation. And that's the way that we wanted to do it. Yeah, there we go. So I didn't want to make the app speak to FileMaker. We wanted the API to be the translator, that the website is the API, and we wanted it to be the bouncer too. We want to keep the bad actors out and anything that's going on. So what the app asks for: sessions, people, rooms, schedule. I have used the schedule like 18 times a day because I cannot remember when I look at it. Things like that. But there's a lot more to it. You can, you can take a picture. You can do your headshot. You can crop that picture. You can set push notifications. You can use the GPS function in the map. You can set reminders. Has anybody used the live events button? I'm just curious. Does anybody even know what that is? One person. Yeah, I didn't think so. It's hidden away. Did you really? Eric, cool, man. Thank you. Yeah, it's hidden away at the top. It's not like it's the greatest thing in the world, but it's up there in the log out. But if you click that, it pops open a little window that tells you what's going on 30 minutes before in this hour that we're in, right? It's just like a quick reference thing, something like that. So we added in little features like that. But so the app asks for that. The API layer translates and guards. This is where we like sanitize the data. This is where we clean it. This is where we make sure we're not putting anything malicious into FileMaker, or corrupted or anything like that. But what the app never sees, well, kind of does in the JSON, but like it doesn't really see the layout, the portal. It doesn't see the record IDs. It doesn't see the field and portal names. It doesn't get all this extra data that it doesn't need. So it kind of keeps it fine lined and trimmed, and it gives us a lot of control over what we want to pass back and forth from point A to point B. And so the cool thing about that is that, since I'm only dealing with these fields, as long as we don't change the field name, if Ron or Alan or somebody or Jonn Howell wanted to get in there, or Eric, get in there and make a change in the database and change the layout and they had the correct permissions, go for it. Do it all you want. It doesn't matter as long as the fields and the IDs coming through are the same. So that enabled people to be able to do it in different parts without like completely messing up the app. Although there were many times that something did get changed and I had to retool, one part or the entire app. That just comes with the territory. So, and this is something that, I wanted to get into. So decide what needs to live on the server. I typoed it there. But some things live on the phone. Some things have to make the trip, right? So I said in the beginning, this is a hybrid technology. We are using FileMaker for all the important stuff. But there's little things like settings, like if you scan one of these, if I get into deep links, the correct QR code, instead of going to the website, it will natively pick up, it's called a deep link. It'll pick up the app and it will pop it to that relevant tab in the app, right? If you use the back button in any of the parts of that, like you go somewhere and you hit the back button without thinking. These are not like important data things I need to make a FileMaker call for. I don't need to reach out to the website. So one of the things I used was IndexedDB. I could have used SQLite or something like that, but IndexedDB worked perfectly. It's just another like tiny, and local storage for very unimportant stuff. Local storage is built in with most React apps in the browser. I think there's like a 5 megabyte limit. Somebody can probably correct me on that, but I think it's like there's a limit to how much you can put in there. So for like little things like the last tab or something that it doesn't matter if somebody sees, we use that. And the main reason for doing that also that I made an IndexedDB in the first place goes back to what if the Wi-Fi goes out, right? Like that would be really embarrassing. I don't want everybody here. They get up the hill and they're here and they're ready to do registrations and we're about to check everybody in and then boom, Wi-Fi goes out, or you're already logged in and you're trying to use walking directions to get somewhere or find a session. Wi-Fi goes out, the whole thing goes down. So there's a lot of offline caching that's going on. The app is pulling in almost everything. Off the top of my head, I think one of the only things that it's not pulling in at the beginning is presenters detail. So if I go on there and I look for Rick's profile and I click on it and get a bio and comfortability level and things like that, that is loaded live because it's just more information than I really wanted to stuff in, you know. But like other than that, pretty much it should all work offline. And there is a little green dot, another little one at the top by the live events that will tell you if you're online or offline. And this comes in this I had to build a big system to get that to work in a certain way because it gets real tricky when you go offline. But what if you're still using the app, right?
Nice.
So that's the local stuff. It will work for the most part with no signal. You know, you download it once, you can read anywhere. And the big thing there, and one of the reasons that React is so cool, is my favorite language right now, is that it's really fast. Like it is really, really fast. It makes it hard for me to browse websites at this point because like I have to wait for the page to refresh, you know, and I have to click a link and it has to load. That's how my attention span has got. I can't imagine what 3 years is going to be, but like React is just really fast. You know, it's like one giant page and it uses something called state to change. But yeah, we send it to the server. So anything that has to stick there for favoriting a session, if it's leaving a review and a comment that again, hopefully people will do, not necessarily for mine, but for other sessions that were really good, you know, things like that have round trips there, that goes to the server. So it's a different thing. It's all getting tracked, or it's all getting routed differently. But that's kind of how that was set up. And I'll get into the caching and the things that are happening a little later. But this is the fun part, I think, where it got interesting, right? So that's like the nuts and bolts. I didn't want to get up here. I'm very glad that I didn't get up here and plan a whole session on how to build a React app, you know, without having AI do it for you. So this is where it got interesting. We had a plan. I don't know how many people in here have been working on a project, and you have a plan and you have a vision for how you want to do it, and you start applying those solutions to something you're working on, and then something goes wrong, right? Probably nobody, probably just me and Dennis were the only two. Yeah. So like it seems like my job is like 2% coding and figuring stuff out, and that might go down, I think, in the near future. You know, it's 98% problem solving and figuring something out. And I think that's one of the most valuable skills when it comes to tech and sometimes business and life skills in general that I think developers bring to the table, is that I think we all collectively are very good problem solvers in a world where a lot of people don't have the patience to want to solve those problems. That's just my personal thing on that. But we had a plan. The real world started asking questions. So these are some of the things we built, and these are some of the things that get all in here. There we go. Yeah. So caching. This is very important, and Ron stressed to me, this is important. This is stuff that people want to use. I think, is everybody in here familiar with caching? Does anybody have no clue what I'm talking about? So basically caching, you know, is basically making a copy of something, you know, so we can get it faster, right? So we did a lot of heavy caching on the website. And as I said, that reduced the amount of calls that we're making to FileMaker. You know, we didn't bombard the database with everything. Pretty much the way we did that, and Ron covered it very well in his session, is that we had caching things in WordPress. You're just saving it to a different MySQL database. It's called a transient, has an expiration date. We build the cache of what we want in there, right? Something gets changed. Well, that fires off a script when it hits FileMaker, and it deletes that cache, right? It's no big deal if the cache is gone. No big deal. It'll get made again. That deletes the cache, right? Nobody has to push a button or anything. It does it automatically. The next person that goes to the website actually pulls that fresh data. So like the person sitting next to you might have made your experience about 82 milliseconds faster. So, you know, thank them, write it on in bus notes. But anyway, so that's kind of the thing. So on the website, every request receives a unique cache key. This is basically what I covered. Current data can come back immediately. So if there is a cache there, most of the time there is, you know, it's not getting changed constantly. We can bypass FileMaker altogether because we know we have the most current set of data and we have it on the web already, and it comes back and it is like blistering fast. You know, it comes back much, much faster because it doesn't have to make that whole round trip. It doesn't have to do any calculations. We just send it back. And then the missing or the stale data, the stuff that either the cache is not there or it's outdated or something is not working with it, that reaches back to FileMaker. So hopefully that's making sense, right? That's our caching system. And we wanted to do it that way. We found out that FileMaker is a beautiful backend for a website. It's a beautiful backend for a mobile app. I mean, it's a little different than working with SQL, but the benefit I think that can be gained from having that sort of RAD environment to build database solutions. I mean, I just think you can't beat it. Like how many people nowadays that don't actually want to be a developer want to sit down and learn how to work with SQL or something like that. If I'm opening a warehouse business and I want to do my own inventory and I'm looking for a solution, I think FileMaker is a wonderful solution, right? But if I have delivery drivers that are going to go all around and I need to be changing the routes and they need to know where to stop to do their deliveries, and I want to do mobile or something like that, so they can just pull out their tablet or their phone and say one of them has an Android, FileMaker works great like that. It works great. It's a beautiful backend as long as there's an API, in my opinion, and it's a good API because there's some that are not fun to work with. But as long as it's a good API, you can kind of make it work with anything. So comes back, and as I said, the fresh result is cache for the next request. So the person next to you, maybe pulled the fresh cache. Nothing changes for the next hour. Everybody else that pulls up some information on the app or the website, you're getting that cache data, right? So it's not coming through FileMaker every time. And then on the phone end, so I mentioned IndexedDB. That is like a pretty mild database solution. That's what I used offline. So when you open it up, it's right after you log in on there, right? After you've logged in or you've been authenticated and it knows that you've logged in, that's when the phone clones and holds the offline data. It's nothing, it's nothing that I always picture there's like some guy with like binoculars looking at my information on the internet, right? Like if I'm cool with that dude seeing my information, no big deal, but if I'm not cool with that dude seeing my information, I probably don't need to store it in a public place or something that's not secure. And so IndexedDB holds like the durable data. It makes a clone of all that kind of stuff. Local storage handles the really light stuff, preferences, deep link stuff, where did you come from, today's timestamp, stuff like that. But like, who cares if people look at? And then the views use the index data, meaning React, without getting too technical, React generally is a singular entity that uses state and components. You can think of every blob, every text box, everything, groups of them as components on there, on the layout, and so to speak, and I call them views on there, but it uses the cache data. And again, you have a much faster experience. I hope the people using the app, we're not bogged down by how long it took to load, and that hasn't been my experience. It's pretty fast. It works great. And fewer repeated calls means less waiting. It means less traffic on your database, and that's always a good thing. We had, I'm not going to go into detail, but we had a project that we were working with, and it was built up in a way where they were connecting web to FileMaker, and there was no caching involved. And they had a page where there was like a table, the equivalent of a modern day table, right, being built. But it was being built row by row, each time connecting to FileMaker to get that row. Oh, wow. And then it gets more. And then once they get the row, I believe it went down to field by field, and there's like 6, right? But there was like 5,000 things in this table, and I never once, this person had it hosted at the server. The server was so close to where the web server was, it worked okay. It really did. And I did some work on it, and I could never once get this thing to load because it would time out after 2 minutes every single time because of how many calls were going. So, there's, yeah.
I'll wait till you're done.
Okay.
Well,
yeah.
I was going to say that's because what we did is we took a copy of that website off of the same server that FileMaker was on, that it was running. We put it on a development server to work with it. And now that we've separated it from that same server, that's what he's talking about. We couldn't even get the page to load because it was so far from the server, which normally in any other application like that wouldn't be a big deal. But the only way that page worked was because it was actually using the web server on the FileMaker server. So it was right. It was on the same machine as the FileMaker database.
Yeah, that's why it was fast. But yeah, you take it out and put it somewhere else, and it slows way down. I just realized that we're probably going to go over a little. If you guys all want to go to lunch, it's not going to hurt my feelings. I started a little bit late, but there are a couple of things I wanted to burn through.
One other thing, because I don't know where you're at and whether you're going to get to it or not, but one of the things that I really hope you're still going to talk about is that I think is so impressed, because I was impressed when you came up with it, is how it queues up actions when you're
That's where we
offline.
are. Yep,
Okay,
that's
that's
our
what you're, yeah.
Dennis?
I just wanted to make a comment before people go to lunch, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Okay. Well, let me try to tackle this one. There's like 3 different things, but I'm gonna try to. I know I started a little late, but with technical stuff. But this is something that I do want to go through a little bit. This is something that I had to build because it came into this again. Is this offline thing, right? So you have this app that's capable of working offline. So it goes offline. You can still favorite stuff. You could then still favorite stuff. I gotta find a new example, man. You can leave a review. You can switch over from schedule to sessions and schedule to sessions. You can still do all that stuff, right? So what happens when you're offline and you create an action? You click something, right? You change something. You leave a review. You leave a favorite, something like that. But it's offline. So how does it know when it comes back online to fire off that action? And what happens if somebody like me that's very ADD goes in and clicks like 18 different buttons when they're offline? You know, how does it know there's 18 things rated? So I made an action queue is the way that I sort of named it, and this is sort of what I went through and built, and this is the way I tackled it, and probably would again in the future because it works really well. Basically, when you do any kind of action on the app, when you do any sort of whatever, favorite session, leave a comment, even upload a photo, all this kind of stuff, it doesn't fire that action off immediately, right? So we have this IndexedDB. We have our own offline database that we can kind of connect to for like the little things, right? The little things that don't need FileMaker. So I created a table in there, an index table, and when you create an action, you do anything, it builds that in this open-ended dynamic way, but consistent way with a payload, and it stores it in there, right? It doesn't, and then it tells it start executing, right? Well, this queue manager has a timer on it using JavaScript, and it's waiting, and it's checking every so often, are we online or are we offline, right? And it will try again if it fails through something. When it picks up that we're online, and these things just stack up, you know, if I'm pressing buttons, this is a favorite, this is a comment, and they just wait. And the queue manager picks that up when you go back online, and it says, okay, we're online again, start at the top. Let's go through each one of these every couple seconds. And when it gets a success, it goes to the next one and removes it. So, yes, Taylor?
No, I was just recognizing the queuing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, I was just wondering, microphone.
I don't know if I can walk over there if you want.
Or you maybe just repeat the question.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, so I can see how in a single user way, right, you can just replay what they did.
Mm-hmm.
How do you ensure correctness if like 2 users are hitting the same
Collision?
Yeah.
Timestamps is how I handle that. Yeah, really detailed timestamps. And that gets handled when those actions get sent to the web. You know, I wasn't able to emulate very well an instantaneous collision. So the question was basically, that works for like a single person. If it's just me, that works beautifully, right? What happens when there's 2 events that happen at the same time? I don't know if Jesse Barnum's here or something, but like they handled that stuff, I think too. What happens if it happens at the same time? And so timestamps really, the one that is the most current wins, but they don't overlap if it's a different action. The only time that would happen is if like 2 people edited the same record, right?
Right.
The timestamp that is the most current would win because it would assume. I don't know which one is the right or wrong one, but the one that is most current would win. Now, if it's,
I can add a little bit to that. In this particular application, all of the actions that I'm doing are only to my own records. So, for instance, I'm only saving my own favorites. I'm only, doing my own rating of a session. I'm only editing my own profile. Nobody else is going to be changing those records, so therefore there's no collision in this particular case. So we didn't get an opportunity because of the use case to really flush out a true synchronization with overlapping, multi-user records with people changing the same records at the same time. So, but there's a plan for it in place, and we kind of theoretically have that worked out. We just haven't. The use case doesn't really require it. So
yeah, technically, if I was to do it, and I got you, Dennis, I would. If I was to do it that way, it didn't come up very much. I wouldn't necessarily defer on the timestamp. I would flag that as like a collision, and I would store it, and somebody would have to approve. Somebody's going to have to make the decision at, at the end of the day, and I'd probably store it as a collision. Dennis, and then right there.
Thank you. First of all, I've got to tell you, it feels like you're my partner in crime.
Yeah.
You did what I didn't do.
Yeah.
I didn't have to do this year. But I want to make a couple of comments that are useful. And first, to those people who are in the room. When you register for this conference, and hopefully you'll register for the next one, keeping your information private, secret, doesn't really help the people planning. When you don't put in your phone number, I struggled trying to find people to build the rideshare thing that I did as a volunteer effort. When you don't put your picture up, you don't know how many men, how many women. And that leads sort of to the two things that evolved out of last year. The genesis of it was Jonn Howell asking in Dig FM one day, can anybody make a map? And I thought he wanted a paper map fold up and put in your pocket. But you know that when you work with FileMaker, one idea leads to another. And very soon it became this interactive thing with favorites and walking directions. Those two things are the ones I want to speak about. We found out after we got here, you really didn't need walking directions. If you were here for 25 minutes, you found out where to eat, you found out where your room was. Nobody got lost. It was a cute idea, it was clever, but until we got here last year, I didn't really know whether people would get lost. So that's how that idea came about. And I mention it because we're going somewhere else next year, we think. So you may have the job again. Maybe it'll be an AI operation instead of what you described today, maybe not. But I want everybody to learn from this 2-year experience that when you register, your information is really helpful. If you're a presenter, describing what you're doing enables people to decide if they want to make a favorite of it. Now, from my own experience at DevCon over the years, I would mark off more things than I intended to actually go to. And then I'd bump into Michael Wallace in the lobby and we talk about what is he going to attend and then I'd decide where to go. But if you've been to DevCon, you know that some of those sessions were standing room only. That doesn't happen at full access. We're in a different kind of environment. So the favorites became a little bit unnecessary if people don't make their decision about what they're going to attend, and if we didn't have a capacity in the room that needed to know in advance how many people were planning to attend that one. So those are just some tips that you can use next year when I'm not involved.
Well, I will say on the map, and I remember your question that Dennis gets the credit for the painstakingly putting the map together for sure last year, but also getting the GPS longitude and latitude. And I don't really have time, but you want to hear a funny story about something else that didn't work, get with me after this. But there was some additional functionality to that interactive map if anybody's used it, and I got so close, but it didn't work. So we put a kill switch in and we killed it before we got here. But the only reason any of that would have worked is because somebody got the longitude and latitude. That wasn't Google Maps. That was something that I pieced together. I think I cover it maybe in a minute. If
Alex, I'm going to jump in just real quick to finish it. Well, let me do this. With the mobile app and the offline sync and everything, one thing that I thought was really cool was that happens automatically, and correct me if I'm wrong, whether you have the app open or not. So when your phone goes back online, those actions sync up, even if you don't have the app open. And I thought that was pretty cool. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that got mentioned.
Yeah. So I don't do the cross-platform version of this. I do this all in Swift, so it's all
cool.
only
Yeah,
iOS
iOS.
only.
Yeah, man.
But to the earlier point about what if it's multiple users, like you're in queuing and everything, as far as like what action is supposed to win. If you end up doing a Swift only or an iOS only app and you don't need the cross-platform stuff, Core Data has a merge policy class object where you can, if it's able to merge the changes safely for multiple users, it will do that if you want it to. Or you can do what you were talking about where the last action wins.
Yeah.
Or you could catch it and then present it to the user, hey, I've got a conflict, what do you want to do? So if in case the next one of these isn't like a cross-platform app, then that would solve that problem for them. So
yeah, I've dabbled with Swift. I mean, this was compiled in Xcode on Mac, and there is some Swift that goes into making any kind of mobile app, and AI is great at helping write that Swift code. But I'm a programmer. I think I'll never let go of that term, and I want to learn the language. So of course I jumped in for a little while. I'm like, that's a beautiful language, man. Yeah.
Just wondering if you could give a maybe 30-second overview of one thing you haven't talked about, and that was updating the application itself.
Yeah, that's probably a really good one. Updating it or getting into the store.
Whatever.
Okay. Yeah, 30 seconds is going to be tough. So, as I said in the beginning, if you want to develop for iOS, as most people do, you're going to need to get a Mac computer. There are services online that rent them out, and I believe this is fine with Apple. It's big enough that I assume they know about
FileMaker
it.
community pretty much all uses Mac.
Yeah,
so
yeah, I
we're
know
good
this
there.
is most of you guys. But anyway, so you want to get a Mac computer, and you're going to use something called Xcode. And Xcode is like the software development kit. That is what communicates with Apple, and there's all kinds of certifications and security keychain things that go on in the background. But that's what AI is for. It's such a great tutor, ask it how to why. That's what I had to do. It's my first one that I got in the store. And it's not bad when you mess with it, right? And then Android, because they're two separate things. Android goes through the Google Play Store. Now, if you're on a Mac as well, you get the benefit of you can develop for Android on a Mac. You can't compile, as far as I know, on a Windows computer. So Android Developer Studio is the software, and that's open source and free. Apple does charge, I think, a $99 a year developer's license, and I think that covers as many as you want. I'm not sure. It does, right? Yeah, but it's $99 a year, and unless I think you get something crazy or you want some like crazy features or like VIP treatment. But yeah, those are the process, and so they will pretty much auto submit to the store. Google, you have to do through the Google Play Console on the web. Apple has Apple's Developers Console. It's a lot to remember for me, man, because I'm bouncing back and forth. So I know that's not a good answer to it, but once they're in the store, right, and you're pushing updates or something like that, they're pretty much handled automatically by the store. One thing we did, and I don't know if you've seen it on there, and this might be what you wanted me to get at, but one thing that we did is we put the current version or the last version or whatever, we kept that as a field in FileMaker. This is some of this initial metadata that I'm pulling. I really don't want to go too long. I know you guys got to eat, but anyways, but we have the last edited version in the app, right? So if we were to go up there right now and push a new update, this thing would pop up when you open the app because it's checking with FileMaker and it's saying, hey, are these versions the same? Oh, they're not. So something would pull up and say, hey, you have an update, get to the store. And the reason that we didn't just let it do it automatically is because like it's kind of sporadic and clunky and there is no like set timeline. Like it's usually really fast, but it could be a few days. Like you just don't know, and that's not very user friendly. So we built in one that like notifies the user. Does that cover it at all?
Yes, I thought that was spectacular.
It's spectacular. Thank you. So yeah, this is the queue kind of process. I think I covered that. If you want more in detailed information, just come to talk to me. But that's kind of the process of that. It really is a system I would use in the future. And I can do this one faster, but one of the things, why did we not just throw a website? There's stuff like a Blazor app, or I think Maui might do this with Microsoft, or you can do these things where you just throw a website, basically. It's just a web app, right? It's just a web app. Like, why don't we just do that? Because we could have took this website we already had and put it in. And the main reason why is because it's not fun to do it. I wanted to do the other stuff. But the other reason behind it is because like native functionality. And that is something, if you're wanting to build an app and getting it in the store, I know Apple in particular looks for that. They want to know that this isn't just a web app. They want to know you're doing something with like the camera or the location or push notifications or reminders or the deep link QR code or something like that that is a native phone functionality. And I've always read that helps your chances of getting accepted into the store. So we did multiple ones. I think we did every one of these. So we put push notifications. If you set your sessions, you can get notifications for the ones that you have favorited. We did the QR deep link. I mentioned that, where you scan the QR code instead of opening the web. If you have the app, it opens the app. Yeah. And those are the other ones we have on there. This is not far from the back. We covered the map with Dennis. Big thing is FileMaker can power more than one experience. That's, if you get nothing else from this, FileMaker can power more than one experience. It works great with cross-platform. There's a little tooling and a little tweaking that goes into it, but we're not limited, and it sounds like the changes that I've heard that are coming up, that door is just going to be kicked open. So it really is It's a wonderful back end for about anything, which brings me to my thank you. That's it. Questions, comments, scan if you want. That's it. Thank you guys. Thank you for